Caroline Ward has traveled more than 60 countries, touching the hearts of many, many individuals, many Shaktis. And also, I'm going to read a little bit more. Caroline established and ran a successful boutique consulting company. She has traveled to more than 60 countries throughout the world, working especially with the rise of the sacred feminine. And also as an international speaker, Caroline is considered to be inspiring, deep, humorous, and you'll have this experience of her today, really humorous, light, and warm, relatable, and really wise. My experience with Caroline, you know, you can be with her and feel so safe and happy in her company and just be yourself and take so much benefit. And this roses are for you, my beautiful, beautiful dear sister, really. And this angel as well. You are that beautiful angel. So enjoy the day, and everyone else, enjoy your beautiful day. I will hand you over to Caroline. Blessings for today.
Thank you so much, Sister Shirley. And you know, as you were speaking earlier and then introducing me as well, excuse me, I've all of a sudden started to get, maybe it's spring coming. I'm in Australia and I'm getting this tickle in my throat. So my apologies. But I was remembering, I think it was my first conscious act of courage. And it's when I went to Africa many years ago, like 1991, so 30 years ago, right? And I was a lot younger, a lot less grey hair, a lot less kilos, but a lot less wisdom as well. And a lot less confidence and peace, I would say. And I remember it was after I had had a very dramatic experience, which some of you, I already know. I had a little sneak preview who's here today. So it's really lovely to see some wonderful old friends and to hopefully get to meet some new ones. So some of you will know a little bit my story from the beginning when I came to visit in South Africa. And it was the first place I ever traveled to. Excuse me. So you can imagine, I was 30. All my friends had traveled all over the world. No, to Europe. But I had been afraid to travel. And after my beloved partner died of cancer, I said to God, because I finally knew that my life wasn't mine anymore, that it belonged to a higher purpose. I'd had such a transcendental experience during the last days that Michael was alive. It was so incredibly sacred and blissful, I would say, even though I was losing the love of my life, that I knew once he had passed, and I stayed in this very kind of high state, even though I was sad at times. But I knew my life didn't belong to me anymore. It belonged to God or something of higher purpose. And so I remember Michael, who was my partner, he was my husband by the time he died, but he had a library. And I went into his library and I pulled out a book of Marcus Aurelius Meditations, and I opened the book at, just a random. And as I opened the book, I read this part that said, in all respects, ask the gods for help. 3 hours meditation will do. And because I was wanting to know what next, I knew that I couldn't continue with the same old job that I was doing, and I didn't know what was next. So 3 hours meditation, and I was terrible at meditation. I used to fall asleep all the time. So I thought, 3 hours, how am I going to manage that? Anyway, I went, okay, I'll set up the time for Sunday. I'll have 3 hours on Sunday. So the first hour I did it in that same library, seated on the sofa. It was a little bit dozy, I can say. Then I went downstairs and I sat in a different position. And that was okay. But the third hour, I went down by the harbour at Sydney. I was living in Sydney at that time. And just a short walk down to the water. And I went and I sat on the end of a pier and on a kind of one of those large, I don't know what they're called, but metal steel things that they tie the boats around with those big thick ropes. And it was a decorative thing these days. So I sat on that and I just said, all right, tell me, what do I do? And there were lots of people around. It was a beautiful sunny day. It was an autumn day. The sun was shining and lots of families and just people walking. And there I was sitting. And all of a sudden, with my eyes open, I had a vision of Africa. And I wasn't a person prone to visions. And I knew it was Africa because there was zebra and giraffe and elephants in the vision. And later I came to feel it was the plains of the Serengeti. No. And literally out of my mouth in full voice came, Africa, you want me to go to Africa? And all these people started looking at me. And I remember saying at the time, well, if this is you and you really do, you're going to have to look after me because I'm afraid to travel. And I thought, I can't travel alone, and especially to Africa, and I don't know what I'll do. So anyway, I looked around, I booked a 2-month overland tour, but I had to, I was to arrive in Harare and leave from there. But I decided to spend a week in South Africa. And then after I'd made all the bookings, I started meditating with the Brahma Kumaris. And I thought, oh, will I still go? Because this feels like a great life path. And I thought, no, the divine is the divine. The message is the message. You go. So I landed in Johannesburg and someone picked me up from the airport, was Rita, and she took me to stay at her place overnight. And then I went to Durban. And I was staying in a hotel and I went to visit to the BK Centre there. And standing at the door, with the door open, as I walked up the stairs, was Sister Shirley. And she had such a feeling of warmth and kind of motherly welcome that for me, it was like being at home. And this sense that everything was going to be okay, that I would be looked after all the way on my trip. And I got this message, a little one of those sort of messages that you could call a blessing, just before I left from Sydney in a ritual of Raksha Bandhan. And I got this message and it said, the hand and the company of God will be with you always. And I just decided to believe that. I didn't know if it was true or it wasn't, but I just believed it. And so I traveled all through Africa, I slept, you know, by a fire under the stars in the middle of nowhere. You know, I went off on tour, walking through markets and things on my own, and I never, ever, ever felt afraid. But I felt afraid before I left. And that's why I still remember it, because it was a huge act of courage. But I really decided that given I had asked for direction and I got this direction, then it wasn't up to me to look after myself. It belonged in the hands of the gods. So I have a very, very beautiful heart connection with South Africa. And I have been back a number of times. And each time I go, the experience is always enriching, it's joyful, it's sacred, excuse me, it's profound, and it's insightful. As a nation, as a vibration, as an atmosphere, as an example for the world, you know, what your country has achieved and no doubt has to continue to transform has been truly astounding. I remember some extraordinary stories. When I was at the Parliament of Religions, World Parliament of Religions in Cape Town, a friend of my friend Rose, who lives in Johannesburg, came to say hello, and she came to say hello in a workshop that I was running. And I never forget this story, and I've told it all throughout the world when I've talked about courage, because for me it was inspiring. And she said she had lived in Mauritius a lot of her adult life due to the situation in South Africa. But after Madiba came to the presidency and the apartheid was, you know, a story that was closing, she returned and she went to live with her mother in Johannesburg. But her mother had very tall walls all around her house and full of wire, barbed wire, all twirled around and pieces of glass stuck in. And you know what I'm talking about. And she said it was so constricting and so like inhibiting and choking. It didn't feel like freedom at all in a land that was supposedly now free. And her mother would never leave the house. And she told us this story in Cape Town. And she said, one day I thought, I can't do this anymore. And she said, I got my backpack, just my, you know, normal going to the shops backpack. I filled it with a few things that I might need. And I told my mum I was going back to Mauritius for a little while and I'd be in touch. She said, I didn't go back to Mauritius. What I did was I just walked. She said, I was afraid. And there were times when I was really afraid. But she said, I took whatever car, taxi came along, whether it was for white, black or coloured, I just took it. And I decided that I would stay out in Johannesburg, moving through Johannesburg until I had no more fear left in me. And she said sometimes, you know, very often people offered that she could go and stay with them. And she just said yes. Whatever came to her as an offer, she accepted graciously and said yes. And she said a couple of times she had to sleep in a park. And there were times when she did feel fear. But feeling that fear, she said, I knew it was something that I had created. There was actually nothing that was to be afraid of. And I worked that with myself. She said, until after 2 months, I went home to my mum's place. She said it wasn't much, but what I could say is that I am one person who lives in the middle of Johannesburg without a drop of fear. I thought, wow, for me, I couldn't imagine what that would be like. You know, to me, that was such courage. Such courage. And so each one of us has different stories of courage, whether that's facing loss or confronting, our deepest fears. Or I remember I used to be so afraid of, I could never have spoken in public, right? Never. I used to have those dreams where you try to speak, and no voice comes out. So terrified of speaking in public. I had no idea what I thought. I just felt numb, that I had no voice and no right to a voice. So yes, when Sister Shirley said she saw me come a long way, it's really very, very true. Because there's no way that I could have joined you like this all those years ago. And I used to even have fear to make a telephone call, a telephone call to apply for a job. So terrified what the person on the other end might say. And some of you will remember this, but many of you will not remember the days when we had phones that you dialed like this. And, I remember I dial, 9, 2, 8, 6, and there'd be 8 numbers. And I get to the last one, and before it could finish dialing, I'd hang up. Such fear, like really this sense of unworthiness, that I didn't have a right and no one would want to know. And if I look back now as I share this with you, I think, wow, this is the result, the consequence of our patriarchal society. A society which I don't blame anyone for, I believe has been co-created throughout time, where we focus on the externals, the things that you can see, the structures, the physiology, the strength, the domination, everything that's bigger, stronger, externalized that you can see has power in that patriarchy. And women co-create and collaborate and are complicit in that as well. And so I ask myself the question now, as I've come this distance, where am I still helping to perpetuate something that stops my voice and stops the voice of not just women, anyone who is a minority in that system? And so I feel that this work that we're going to do today of my courage, your courage, is a very powerful step in this direction. I'd like to share a little bit, just for about 3 or 4 minutes, maybe a little longer, how this My Courage, Your Courage came to be. In 2008, you might remember the global financial crisis. I was living in Chile in South America. So most of my world, my life, my many decades, has been very much in the Southern Hemisphere. So my first foray outside of Australia was Africa. I lived in Australia. I've lived in Australia most of my life. I grew up here. And then I lived 13 years in South America. There's a really interesting connection that goes on between these 3 continents that make up the Southern Hemisphere. And living in Chile in 2008, with the global financial crisis, we saw that everything became very fragile. And the media was kind of ramping up the chaos and the crisis and the fear in the country. A very good friend of mine who was running the BKs, the Brahma Kumaris over there, she decided that it was time to change the conversation in the country. She never thinks small. She always thinks big and believes it's possible. And what we decided to do was we were going to change this conversation around the fireplace with women. It was a metaphor, the fireplace. But in the end, we decided to work with this quality of courage, and that we would charge women to move this energy of courage through their families throughout the country. And I'm going to tell you a little bit as we go through. I'll show you some things why we did that. But I remember reading some material way back in the 80s when I worked in advertising. And there's a woman in the United States called Faith Popcorn. She was someone who was able to predict trends. And back in those days, before the internet, so before email, before texting, before Facebook and Snapchat and TikTok and all of that, she said that if a woman found a good bargain or a sale or a product that worked really well, within 24 hours, she'd told 7 other women. So we decided this was a good strategy. We would work through women and that the multiplier effect of this courage. And it would be your courage and it would be my courage. So together it would be our courage and our courage to uplift the country and transform the conversation. The results of that project, we worked for a whole year and we worked face to face in the project, in the process that we are going to do pretty much here today. We worked face to face with 3,000 women in a country of 16 million. And the country is 4,500 kilometers long. So I was in a car most of 2009. And it was one of the most amazing years of my life. In the same way South Africa has extraordinary landscapes, so does Chile. It's got the driest desert in the world in the north. It has the Andes Mountains, which are like the Himalayas of the Southern Hemisphere, in the east. It's got the Pacific Ocean in the west. It's got Antarctica in the south. So it's phenomenal. And the people, the women, were shaped by their landscape. So in the very bottom at the Straits of Magellan, you had these women in that place. When you get out of the car, you have to hold on to the door of the car. Not for you, but the wind will blow the door off the car. So you can imagine the power and the force that they have to live with, and their husbands or their lovers or their partners typically all went to work in Bass Strait, down at the bottom, and not in Bass Strait, down at in Antarctica or in I forget the name, Tierra del Fuego, no, and they would be working on oil drills, oil platforms there, and they'd be gone for 5 months of the year, back in time for just the women to get pregnant, and then off again. And so these women had to build their own houses, make their own money, raise their own kids. And very often when the man came back, he didn't really come back to them, or he came back an alcoholic or whatever. So these were very powerful women who were shaped by their environment. And you know what I mean, right? There's many places in your country where the landscape also shapes you. You know, if you've got Table Mountain at your back, what is that? It's like the women in Santiago have La Cordillera de los Andes, the big mountain behind them. and they feel the women in the north, they're dry like the desert, powerful. And then you've got people in the vacation spots of the beach, La Serena, which means the serene. You can't move them. They're really too relaxed. But we did this project, and we did the process we're going to do with you today. And what was amazing was at the end of that year, we didn't have a way of measuring, right? Measuring the metrics of the impact of courage. But at the end of that year, in the market review that was done by the kind of the king, the person whose voice is the most powerful voice in what happened in the year, he said, I can't understand it. He wrote this in the main newspaper. I can't understand what has happened this year. It was the year of the pig flu. It was the year still with the lag of the financial crisis. He said, it was completely a year of crisis. And yet, the estado de ánimo, so Spanish, that means the spirit, the mood of the country rose throughout the year steadily. And the other anomaly in that year, for the first time ever in Chile, which is a very machista country, or, you know, even the women, the mothers are machista. They are, you know, give all the power to the boys as they're growing up. So the boys grow up and the women grow up thinking the men have all the power. So in that country, for the first time ever, what happened was that women were promoted in their jobs much more than men. And I forget the stats on it. While we didn't have a way to measure that, we knew that it was the power of courage. And I'm going to show you why. So I'm going to share the screen with you now and show you what happened and why it is that, here we go. So women together changing the world. And it's very obvious and it's very invisible as well. So Michelle Bachelet, I just want to share about her. She was the first woman president in Chile at the time when we did this project. And this, what she's written here is part of the prologue that she wrote to the book. She went on to, had a second term as the president. She went on to establish UN Women to be the executive director and the Undersecretary General. And she's currently the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights. She's an extraordinary human being. She's a pediatrician. And she comes from, her father was killed in the dictatorship of Pinochet. So it's a really interesting leadership that she had when half the country still believed that that dictator saved them from communism. So it's a tricky thing. But I've cut together pieces, and she said women's achievements are always in solidarity. That what is achieved for one opens up space for others as well. Because courage is not that momentary outburst or that divine inspiration that we often think. Courage is, on the contrary, a daily disposition to action and integrity. Courage is almost always silent. It's a structural condition, a force that moves us and moves others. And it is a permanent force. It is in every mother who, often alone, takes care of her family. It is in every neighbourhood or community leader who manages collective projects. It is in every woman who joins the armed forces, the board of directors of a company, or politics. It's in every worker and in every student, in every shopkeeper and in every woman settler. Perhaps the greatest lesson of My Courage, Your Courage is to demonstrate that courage is not only in an extraordinary feat, but in every corner of the planet, making the impossible possible at every moment, and thus weaving together the world. So in 2009 is when we did the project, and I went to a conference in Miami where I was doing a keynote speech for about 400 coaches at the premier kind of coaching institution worldwide. And I met a woman there, Sandra Ford Wollstone, and she has become known as the courage expert. And she said to me that her research, she did 3,000 surveys and 450 deep interviews. And her research results showed that only 11% of women think that they are courageous. And when she told me that, having worked with women for 30 years now, not back then, but I thought, that's not possible. And she said, it's not possible. Because when she went into the deep interviews, women would tell her stories. And then she would say, but that's courage. And I want you to listen to this when I say this, because I'm sure it will resonate for you. She would say to these women, but that's courage. And the women would say, oh, that's not courage. I just did what I had to do. And they dismissed it. Powerful things. My mother, who went and challenged Sister Mary Assumpta, who was the scariest school principal in the Catholic school I went to, who said that I had lied. And I told my mum I did not lie. And my mother went and confronted her. I mean, that's courage. But my mum would just say, no, I just knew I had to do that. I had to stand for my daughter. Courage. You know, courage is more than that. I just knew what I had to do and I did it. I mean, what a power. If we dismiss it as nothing, then it's like having millions of rand in the bank and not knowing we have it, so we can't access it. It's a resource. It's a powerful resource that we can call on, and we have it. We wouldn't have got to the age that we are now. However old you are right now, I turned 60 this year, and if you'd asked me, I would say, no, I'm not courageous if I hadn't done this work, if I hadn't put attention to gather up, to curate my own courage, to accumulate it and know what it is. And it's different for everyone, right? It's for someone to try and make a phone call about a job. It's like to think that that takes courage. They might think it's pathetic. But for me, it was a huge amount of courage. For my mum to walk out on my dad, who was an alcoholic, who she adored, the only man she ever loved and the only man she ever went out with, even to this day when they've been divorced now for 40 years. But she divorced him for her own self-respect. Such courage to walk away. But for someone else, it would be enormous courage to stay and make the marriage work. For someone else, you know, maybe it's courage to come out of the closet and say, I'm different. I don't fit into any category of gender. My body doesn't make sense of who I am. That's a courage for someone else to stand up and say, you know, I'm a woman and I'm proud to be a woman. Someone else to say, you know what? I want to go own that I'm a woman, that I want to be this unbelievable, unlimited, infinite self that's even more, that embraces the divine feminine. Courage is everything. Courage to have children, courage to not have children, courage to walk, courage to run, courage to stand still, courage to let things be, courage to take no more, put a boundary. It's different for each one of us in each moment. So it's not something that we can say is a formula. So when we go into this process today, just remember that as you listen to someone else's story, you're just going to put your judgment hat aside, even from your own story that you're going to get to tell, because our courage is what moves us forward. And as we take a step, one tiny step sometimes is what opens the floodgates for us to fly. So I want to just go back a little bit. Why have I put the map of the world? And I mentioned a little bit about how we're in the Southern Hemisphere, right? And a very interesting thing is that this map is completely distorted. That Greenland, which is up here, this is Greenland, right? And Greenland is 1/14 the size of Africa. But look at it here. It's not at all. It's in fact massive. And North America is not that big at all. This is a political map. It's a map that one of the popes, I forget his name, asked Mercator, to a cartographer in the 1569, I think it was, to do a map that showed where Christianity was throughout the world. And so it's a very, very distorted map. And you can have a map which in fact is flipped. And people say, but you can't have the Southern Hemisphere on top. Well, why not? The Southern Hemisphere doesn't mean underneath, it doesn't mean below. All it means is south, and south is there, or there, or there, or there, but it's not below. And this is a politicized map because very often above means superior, below means inferior. As Australians, we grew up with very strong inferiority complex. We come from convicts. You know, the convicts from the Northern Hemisphere were sent to the South because they were useless. So we were convicts and prostitutes. That was our history. So we come from a stock of low self-esteem. I lived in Chile for 15 years, nearly 13. Very low self-esteem, you know, sort of half Spanish, half Indigenous, no value. And I know Africa suffers from that as well. Australia's been lucky to kind of come out of poverty, but it doesn't mean it's our spirit is strong. But you can flip the map, and it's fun to do that. You should search for it. It's quite interesting. But if you look at the map in its more real sense, have a look at Africa. It's solid. It's right. You can look at it like this. It's bigger than any other continent. It's more predominant. It has more presence. And imagine if you grew up with a map that was like that. It's much bigger. Look at the United States of America over here. It's tiny. It's just like a little nothing. And imagine if you came from a continent like that as you were growing up and your education said, I'm from there. I'm from there. It would be a very different story. And the men wouldn't feel like they had to prove themselves as much. And they wouldn't have to play out, you know, what is the antithesis of being weak, of being less than, of being, you know, substandard, and treat women the way they do. Anyway, it's a politicized thing. So why am I telling you that? Because I want us to know it's not personal. Our lack of self-esteem or our lack of confidence or our lack of courage or our scarcity when we put other women down, when we gossip about others, where we feel threatened by other women when they're too beautiful or they're too powerful or they're too successful, and we make them less because we think there's not enough to go around, and that if they're too good, I'll be less. That's got to change. And this is the courage I think that we need, the courage to stand together, really stand together for each other and for the future generations and for the world today. And know that we can reshape the conditioning that we've all had about who we've been told we are. Courage. I want to show you here. Here is courage. This is a work, and I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I'm very happy to share this information with you so you can have a look at it later. But this, some of you will know this work, David Hawkins, Power versus Force. So it's the power of the soul versus the force of the low self-esteem personality that manipulates life, that lives by kind of victim mentality. And even if you're fighting, it's still victim because you're fighting to get power that you don't have. Whereas what he says is that courage is the point here in the middle. He's been able to measure these different states of consciousness. That courage is where it's the portal through which we can move up into those higher states of consciousness where we are able to transform ourselves, our mindsets, our energy fields, who we thought we were, and the world around us. And so it is an incredibly, incredibly powerful portal of energy. It's not the courage to fight, it's the courage to access our own power that then gives us clarity on what we must do and what we must not do. This thing of, I know I just did what I had to do. So as we go through and we see that courage is something that activates something in us, it's not personal, it's collective. When we sleep together. When we wake together. Courage, the root of the word is cur in Latin, which means heart. So it is about coming back. And if you look back at this symbol, it's in the center, it's at the heart chakra, the heart center. And the heart chakra is green as well. So it's like when we come back to our heart and we learn to listen to our own heart, not the messages of society, the messages of conditioning, the messages even of what we hate or don't like or resist, but what would we love? What would we truly love? Then we start to get into this area where we start to move upwards. Then we can ask, how are we perpetuating the patriarchy? How am I compliant? When I know that I have power, I can use the courage to let go of my anger. I get angry. I've been really angry this year at times when I've seen things in Australia, and I've been often numb or paralyzed with how to respond. And so I haven't responded until I've worked out my own anger, because I know that's just going to add more fire into the fear. And I want to bring something that brings more light, more clarity, more power to transform the situation. So, how does courage make the difference? It brings us into our own higher knowing, this Shakti. As we began, Sister Shirley and Nita played this beautiful dance with these words. Shakti means the divine feminine. And the divine feminine isn't something out there. Yes, there are these sort of goddesses. I was looking up the goddesses from Africa and I thought, I'm going to pick the wrong ones. I don't really know. So You have to forgive me. I haven't made it relevant to South Africa. But I saw one which was fairly fearsome. Oya, I don't know if that's how you say it. She was really kind of stern, like clear, detached, powerful. And she reminded me of Kali from India, this very warrior-like goddess. So it's not passive. The divine feminine is not passive. It's powerful. As the word said, in a moment she can bring the sword of Durga or crush the rocks, swallow the earth. Kali swallowed the earth. That's extraordinary. You think about it. Kali means death and it means time. And she swallowed the earth and she gave birth anew to a new time, a new world. So it's not passive, but it's not giving power to the old paradigm. It's not fighting the patriarchy. And in fact, my friend Rose, I don't know if she's here, but I met her when she came to live in Australia after having fought for 12 years with anti-apartheid, and she was exhausted. And when she came here, I met her then, and she told me, and I tell this story because I think it makes so much sense to me, that when there was apartheid and anti-apartheid, it was just the same system. There was no new system until there was the third thing, which was the Rainbow Nation. And then that was an idea, a dream, a possibility that could move you from that system that was stuck. And this is what courage does. It gives, you have to have the courage to let go of the thing you hate. Let go of the thing that you fear. Let go of the one that threatens you. Let go of that and go in and find and harness your own Shakti power, your own goddess. It's not a goddess out there. It's an archetype from primordial time that sits in our own consciousness that we have to reclaim. And this is what happens when we use courage. It is the courage to look at what's inside us and change that. Because when we change that, the world changes, as I was sharing about what happened in Chile. So next, there's a saying, and this I've heard in the Brahma Kumaris, I've heard it in Christianity, and I've heard it in Judaism as well. I don't know about in Buddhism or Islam or other traditions, but there's this saying that if you take one step of courage, God takes 1,000 steps to help. And I always like to understand how that might happen. It's not begging for help. It's like you step in that direction, right? And when you do, what you do is you rise up, you go to your heart. And when you're in your heart, you've joined the domain, the realm of the spiritual. And then you're available for the heavens. You're available for all the help that you need. You're connected to all the power of the cosmos, ready to support you. This is what courage does. Cœur, heart, corazon. So when we do that, we have the courage to let go of what we don't like, the courage to step into our own inner world, and then we have the courage to uplift each other. Even if I'm not feeling great, I know that by uplifting another, I will also uplift myself. So now we're going to come to you having time to share your stories of courage. and be heard, be witnessed. And I think South Africa was probably the first country to actually be an example to our whole world of the power of stories of reconciliation, of being witnessed, particularly the power of being witnessed. There's nothing more incredible than to tell your story. And I have a psychologist friend who says, tell the story, you listen without judgment and without memory, because it's confidential. But you don't have judgment, you listen with full presence. So we're going to move into that now. But just before we do, I want to come back and just see if you've got any questions, or if there's anything that someone might like to. I'm just having a quick look through the chats now. Someone said, I guess you're pointing out more towards resilience, which perhaps is an after product of courage. Well, that in itself is interesting too, isn't it? There are different definitions of resilience, which is often to do with, battling through. And other people think it's about a sort of inner stability, that nothing can really touch you, that you've kind of created a powerful central core where you're connected to the earth, you're connected to the heavens, to the divine, and doesn't matter what comes at you, it can hit you, but it can't put you over. So it depends. You can have a kind of bounce back resilience where you're still talking about the circumstances are driving the situation. Or if you're doing a resilience from a more consciousness perspective, I feel that what you're doing is you're stoking your own fire before there are circumstances. You're building your power, you're building your Shakti, you're harnessing and accumulating that. And as you do, you move forward with momentum, with a sort of mass. In quantum physics, it's this sort of a massed energy. So you rise up higher than the obstacles, higher than your own karma, the kind of consequences of life. So it knocks you, but it doesn't knock you over. So a kind of distinctions about resilience, right? And when you have that second resilience, you have a courage not to engage with the circumstance, not to fight it, and not to believe it as truth, to just give it a bit of space, be more detached. And the courage can then come in a whisper or a loud, clear voice from within. That's a fantastic question. Thank you about that, or positioning of resilience. I hope, you're saying it, yeah, that boulder of courage. Very good. You're from Johor Bahru in Malaysia. Wow. And you want to bring the Four Faces of Women there. Okay, we've done that there. I was there a few years ago doing it too. Courage is unlimited. Tiny steps make you fly. So true. Indrani, thank you. That's so, so true. Shivani, what are you saying? In India, even though mythologically courage is symbolic in the Shaktis that are worshipped as goddesses, it's often accompanied by stories of destroying evil. Absolutely. I think I don't know if I have the pronunciation right, but Durga and the Shakti army destroys the army of, I think it's Mahishma. I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure. And they return, the divine feminine returns earth back to heaven. So that would not be as much for courage, because it's the job of a goddess to destroy evil. There are different versions of the goddess too. So she might exude courage symbolically to a human being who worships her, But otherwise, it comes naturally to a goddess to destroy rakshas or demons, really nasty and fiery demons and monsters. Yeah, go Shaktis. Yeah, it's true. But again, I want to say, Shivani, I love that you know these stories, right, and are inspired by them. But these stories are not about some goddess out there. They're our stories. When we lose connection with the divine feminine, when, you know, in Europe, all the witches were burned, and they're not witches. They're just those who understand the power of the invisible, of the energies of courage, of empathy, of purity, of that our minds can heal, that nature has healing properties, that we can listen and find things in nature that bring us all together, that there are rituals that move energy, that feng shui, that vastu, that there are all these many things that belong to the vast wisdom of the feminine that got killed and destroyed and buried underground by the patriarchy. And so then what we did is we put the divine feminine in these things that we worshipped outside of us, the goddesses, the Shaktis, or the mythology, and they were there. And now it's time to reclaim them. They are just archetypes. They are energy, but they are ours to own as well. And so courage in that sense is not about bravery. It is this clarity that comes that I know I can do what I have to do. So it's interesting. The practice is to embody these Shaktis. I'm working with a group of women at the moment that I work with in my coaching. And we're doing that. I go, what's she like in her physiology? What does she breathe like? When she walks, which part of her body leads? What's her main thought pattern? How can you embody her? So it's really about bringing us into the present of owning that power ourselves. Thank you, Shivani. Very good. Okay, Eva, you're asking about the mixture of love and fear. Great question. Do you know there cannot be a mixture of love and fear? There never is. You can only have love or fear. What can happen is that you're experiencing love and then a thought comes or a feeling and you flip out of love and you're in fear. They can't be together. It's one or the other. So what I will say to you that a very, very clever way, this very beautiful young friend of mine from Barbados, who I knew in Chile, she's from Indian descent, super smart, and she used to have a practice which I think this will help. When she was afraid or jealous or frustrated or kind of overtaken by her ego or feeling guilty or ashamed or embarrassed, she had a trick, and she would say to herself, say she was feeling guilty, I love feeling guilty, or jealous, and which, you know, who likes feeling jealous? No one, right? It's ugly. She'd say, oh, I love my jealousy. And the incredible thing is that just by saying that, it changes the feeling. And if you look at we'll have a look again at the ladder of consciousness. But even if you just accept, say you're feeling hopeless or you're feeling embarrassed or you're feeling angry, just accept it. If you accept, okay, I feel really angry. That's what I feel right now. The power to just accept it doesn't mean condone it, doesn't mean even have thoughts about it. Just accept it. Acceptance immediately has you rise up into the field of power, away from force, into the realm of love. Just accepting. You stop the battle. when you're looking at those lower vibrations, it's a fight, it's a struggle, it's a battle against that which you don't like. So Eva, thank you very much. It's a great question. Quantum Shakti energy refocused. Chanlal, thank you. You cannot cross a chasm with 2 simple steps. Do not be afraid to take a quantum leap. Yeah. And I think this thing, baby steps. In today's world where there's a lot of expectation of us being super women, right? We feel like we have to do everything enormous, overachieve. And when we talk about these Shaktis, they swallowed the world and they're amazing. Yeah, that's who we are. But we start off with baby steps. And I love this story that comes from Frozen 2, the Disney movie. And a friend was telling me the other day, he was getting this strong intuition to watch Frozen 2. And he said, I have no idea what that is or why. And it kept coming back and back. And he's a single dad. And he said to his daughter, want to watch Frozen 2? And she said, sure. So they sat down with, popcorn and snacks and things. And he watched it. And he didn't know why he's watching it until it got to the part where Anna is stuck in the dark cave. So Anna's the sister of the one who sings, who creates ice everywhere, right? The frozen girl. And she's the other princess. And she was overwhelmed. She's in the dark cave and she thought she'd lost, her sister was dead, her friend was dead, everyone was gone. And she said, when the future is unclear and you don't know where you're going, just do the next right thing. It's so simple, right? It's so simple. And he said, I thought, that's it. That's why I had to watch Frozen 2, because his future was so messy and confused and unclear. And this mantra, just do the next right thing. The little thing, the baby step. Okay, if I can't make the call, I can find out the phone number. That's the first step. It moves me in that direction. And off I go. So, how do we instill courage in our young students from primary school? So that this becomes an integral part of their development. It would be so awesome to start connecting with our Shakti gifts from a young age, Vanessa. So, so true. I remember many years ago, I was doing a retreat, running a retreat on the Shakti. It was a follow-up to the 4 faces. And I think it was the 5th face. So it was on the Shiv Shakti. And there was a woman there, and we did this blindfolded walk through the forest. And they had a thread that they could hold on to, and there were paths through the forest. So it wasn't too scary. And we had people there checking, but blindfolded, and it was about 15 minutes walking in the dusk. And this woman, she was originally from Bosnia, and she'd left from Bosnia because it was in civil war. If you remember, there were often, this is what many of you have lived through as well, I know, but bombs in the streets and gunfire and people dead and shot and fire, car bombs and all sorts of things. She was pregnant, and we said to her, she was 8.5 months pregnant, right, when she did this retreat. And we said, probably don't do the blindfolded walk. She said, no, I will do it. Or we had people walking behind her, in front of her, making sure she was okay. But what I asked her was, she had 2 children. And I said to her, how did you deal with what was going on with your children? And Vanessa, this speaks to, I think, your question about how we instill Shakti. And she said, what I noticed is that if we were in the street and something took place, something violent, and, there was all of a sudden war around us, the first thing my children would do would be look to me. And if I was okay, they were okay. And she said, so it's a big responsibility, but how could I be unshakable myself so that my kids just absorbed and modeled from my energy field? And this is what we're talking about, is that our change will bring about the change in the future. Even, I'm talking a lot, right? But it's more about how are we? Who are we? People can't hear much anymore, so I'm not going to talk so much anymore. But Vanessa, I think the more that we hold this space of power, and by power, it's not power over, it's the power of our own authentic being, which is both empathic and powerful, insightful and clear. It's a capacity to see way beyond what's obvious and visible. It's the power of being able to recognize patterns and move with the flow of things. It's the power to trust life, to dance with life, to co-create with others, to lead and then step back, to give to others and know I don't have to take, it will come to me, and then receive it when it comes and be grateful. I mean, it's all of this, and that's the world of abundance, the world of Lakshmi, of the goddess of wealth and beauty and prosperity. So many, many things. Okay, I want you to do what you're here for now. And this afternoon, you're going to have a chance to work with these concepts and these ideas in creative ways. I wish I could be there with you. I'll be asleep because it's now, for me, 7 o'clock at night. But we're going to work now in storytelling, witnessing, really deep listening, sacred listening. It's not a conversation. It's giving voice and being witnessed, and then changing roles. And then this afternoon, you're going to get to play with the same kinds of ideas, but in the creative group. So very beautiful. You're going to have a great time this afternoon. So I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to go back to the PowerPoint so you can see clearly what it is that is our process. So sharing your stories of courage. If you know you have this power, then what you can't do with it is, let's go. You're going to have, I put 22 minutes, but that's like being very super structured, and there'll be some little bit of flexibility in that. We'll check on you. I'm going to ask you to put your phones, if you haven't already, to put them in airplane mode. So if you've got them with you, take them out, put them in airplane mode. You cannot listen and be fully present to someone else if you've got texts coming through. You can't be connected with your own authentic self if you've got, notifications popping up on your screen. So please take your phone now, pop it in airplane mode, and then if you can go to the place where you've got a timer, and I want you to create a timer for 7 minutes. If you don't know how to do it, don't worry. The person who you're going to be paired with probably will. So if you haven't got it, don't worry. And now I'd like you to take a screenshot of this screen or a photo from your camera. Because once you go into the breakout rooms, you're there, and I can't, there's so many of you, I can't come into the rooms to say, okay, your time's up now, or change roles. You're going to have to manage that yourselves. And, you know, if we were in a room together, I would take full responsibility with the other sisters who are here from the BKs, full responsibility to hold a very sacred space and ask you to rise up energetically into that. But on Zoom, it's up to all of us. You know, it's about being really present, not going into chat, not sort of just being ordinary. This is like calling you into your sacred self. And that's maybe uncomfortable a little bit, but that's okay. That's why you're here. You're here not to just do more of the same. You're here to listen to what is truest about yourself, what is calling you, and use this space as a practice space to step up. So don't worry about the story. I'm going to take you in a little visualization so that you can get the story. But once you get into the room, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves, not long stories, not how many kids or no kids or, you know, how long you've traveled or what spiritual, nothing, just your name and
Please can
where you live.
5 minutes.
Could you just, would you mind checking your mics are in mute? Thank you. So just where you're living, where you're from. And then the second one is decide who is going to go first in telling their story and who will listen first. And then make sure you've got your timer ready. And see if you can do this. Just 5 seconds, 10 seconds before you start to speak. Just both of you close your eyes, take a big deep breath. And as you then breathe out, you then open your eyes. And take a moment before you speak. Just let yourselves connect eye to eye, soul to soul, really. And then the person who's going to share their story will then share their story. The other person will listen until the 7-minute chime happens. And then that's a signal for the person who's sharing their story that they've got a minute to wrap up. So you just do that in a very easy, gentle way. And when you're finished, you simply say, and with that, I'm complete. And then you stop and you just take a deep breath again, close your eyes and change roles. And the other person will share. And remember to put your timer on again. And when that's done, the same thing, your timer will finish. So this is about being really present, being a witness, being available to see the other person without judgment. And please, there's only one rule, just one. And that rule is no advice. Doesn't matter if you've been through the same thing. Doesn't matter if you know exactly what to do. It's not your place to give advice. And you're not being asked to in this case. This is simply for each one to have their voice, to tell the story. So please take a photo of that. When you get to the end and both of you have shared, you'll get like 4 or 5 minutes, 3-4 minutes, just to share what it was like to be really listened to, without interruption, without a conversation, without someone saying, oh, I know, that happened to me too. Oh my God, isn't it? No, none of that. Space. And just experiment what it's like. So whilst it might not always be 100% clear, this is about the courage to tell your story. So just get yourselves ready where you are. I'm going to take you through a short visualization so that when you go into the room, you're going to have a story to tell that you feel you don't even maybe remember, but you're going to remember. So it's a short visualization. Sit where you are. Take a nice deep breath and close your eyes. And as you exhale, I want you to imagine that you can really easily just let drop from your body, from your mind, anything that's got weight or that's carrying any noise. Just let it drop, sitting on the floor like a cloak around you. And you might even want to sigh, a big sigh of, and be present in your heart center. It's like you can feel your heart beating. I want you to imagine, if you can, that you're seated in a cinema and you're the only person there. It's your own private cinema. And all of a sudden, there's a countdown on the screen. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The story of your life. In summary. And on the screen comes images and moments from when you were a baby. You won't maybe remember them, but there'll be stories that you were told and photos or videos that you will have seen. Any stories. You don't have to project anything from yourself consciously. They're just coming up. And then there'll be some stories from when you were a toddler, a little one. And you might even smile seeing yourself. You might remember some scenes when you were afraid, but you're watching from a distance. And then you're at school. What was it like to be a little one at school and then growing up into high school and puberty and all that went with all those hormones and all the things that go on, which are sometimes interesting and sometimes entirely unacceptable and untenable and unforgivable almost around being a young woman. And then you grow up and you move on from school and you go to whatever's next in your life. There are friendships and relationships and all of the things that go on with being in your 20s or a teenager. And for those of you who are older than that now, you see scenes coming from maybe your 30s with family now, like kids and work, different things, scenes. And if you're older, different decades start to come to mind. And there are losses. And there are triumphs. And you're watching at a distance and you take a nice deep breath. And as you exhale, the screen comes to a pause and there you are on the screen in a scene. from some moment in your life. And I want to ask you, in that scene, what was happening? What was the fear? If there was any, perhaps it was a kind of courage where you just took a decision, you knew what to do, and you went straight ahead. What was the flavor of your courage there? And if you're not yet seeing a scene, or you don't know what it means, don't worry, it'll come to you. So just relax. Just stay with it. What were the qualities? If you look at yourself in that scene, who were you being? The quality of your being in that scene. And take a nice deep breath and feel the quality of your courage in your heart emanating out through your body, through your being. And in a moment, you're going to be invited to go into the breakout room. And you just need to accept. And remember, you just follow this simple set of instructions. If you get it a bit mixed up, don't worry. Just make sure each of you is really present for the other. Get ready to open your eyes now and just hold with you that story and the presence. And you're going to be asked to accept to go into a breakout room now. So go, you'll have 22 minutes, and then we'll come back and we'll close up for this morning. So Nita or whoever's managing the breakout rooms, if you could do that now, that would be great. Thank you. I'm just wondering if maybe Olive and Usha can. There's a couple of people with a couple of rooms with only one person in them.
Okay, I'll just try and maneuver and just see if we can move them around.
Om Shanti. No. Hello, I don't know if anybody can hear or see me.
Yes, I can.
This is
Hi,
Elena.
Elena.
I can't see or hear the person with whom I share the breakout room. I don't quite know what to do.
Okay, let
Which
me.
room were you in?
Number 5.
Okay.
Yeah, Dimple is.
Can you join the room?
Yes. Oh, how do I do that?
Well, I will put you in.
Can you put in again? Okay.
I will allocate you to a room. Let's see if we can.
To number 13, maybe. Nisha is there alone.
Elena, it asks you if you want to join a room. You would need to say yes. Okay, she's gone.
Hello, it's Esther. I was with Nisha and I think there was a breakdown.
Room 41 only has one person.
Yeah.
Okay, I will put them somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think Usha Rani also wants to go into a room.
Hello,
Hello.
hello.
Hello,
Hi,
yes.
I was with Nisha and then there was some interruption and then I was disconnected.
What room number was that?
Okay, with Nisha, what room number was it?
Nisha.
Yeah, with
Number?
Nisha. Oh, I can't remember the room number.
Nita, Esther was with Chantel in room 30. Okay,
Okay,
there
I'm
we
gonna
go.
try and
No, there she got in.
okay.
Om Shanti Arnabin, I was in room 24 and there is no one there.
Okay. Is
It
there
says
another
Usha.
one? There's a vacant space.
It
Anyway,
asks you to join. I see you are in there, but it says not joined. You and Olive.
Okay.
It should ask you to join the breakout room. Then you
but I
would
think
then
Olive is not joining a room.
either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So is there another room with one person where you can put Usharani?
Everyone is paired up already.
Okay.
Okay, Dimple.
Simple, yeah. Otherwise, me and Usharani can go into room 4.
I've put Usharani to room with Dimple, but somehow it's not showing that she needs to join. Usharani, you need to accept and there. Okay, she's good.
But Dimple's also not showing up as in the room, having
No, now
accepted.
she's in.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Olive?
Olive
Olive is
also-
not joining, looks like,
Yeah.
no. Esther came out again.
With Varsha.
Where I went, there's no sound coming through. I'm greeting, but no one is responding.
No one's responding in that, or maybe they're choosing not to engage.
Oh, and I was so fine with Nisha, and then it's just that we had that interruption. I
Nisha.
wonder if she's paired with somebody else or she's still in the same room.
Okay, I'm gonna put you with someone. Esther.
And not Esther and Varsha together, who are here now waiting for someone? Some room?
Yeah. Again, Varsha and Catherine are in room 40, but they haven't joined, so they need to do
So
something.
Vashna left the room. We did speak. I'm Catherine.
Okay, so y'all done already.
We're done. Yes.
Really?
So she understood that you could leave the room if you were finished. Yeah.
Wow, in 10 minutes. Okay.
You got 10 minutes.
Well, instead of 22 minutes,
Oh.
it took 10. Okay, no problem. Welcome back, everyone. So we're going to do a little meditation and a little movement as well, not at the same time. But just before we do both of those, I'd like to ask you to close your eyes where you are and really, again, connect into your heart. I'm going to ask you to put your right hand on your heart and your left hand on your right hand. And just be very present to breathing in and out your heart. And if during the telling of your story or the listening and witnessing of the other story, if anything came up for you that was painful, that had not been processed, then allow it to come and allow it to find a place either for it to move on if it's time for it to move on, or a kind of waiting room if you need to address anything, but not just yet. Just allow it to sit somewhere in some place not to be ignored if anything came up. If you're ready to let it fly away, or if it was a story simply of creativity and courage and triumph, then sit in that fully in your heart. But claim the courage, feel it in your heart. And as you take a deep breath, I wonder if you can feel it, this courage, this energy, this power that you have. Feel it moving down to your feet, to your toes, down into the earth, this African continent. Feel that solid connection. And as you breathe in deeply and feel your heart, allow the energy to move upwards and to connect with the divine, with the highest source of pure energy that you can find. Just tune into that. Fly up to the earth and to the sky. And with each breath that you take, know that this courage of yours is such a companion throughout time. If you look back, you would see that it's been with you all the way. And if you look ahead to tonight, to tomorrow, to next week, even next year, to your old age, it will be with you, right by your side, right at your back, right in your heart. The earth, the heavens, you, this energy of absolute heart-conquering courage. And I wonder if you can extend and expand a kind of auric bubble around you. A bubble of protection and a bubble of power that comes from this heart source. Is sustained by the divine, anchored to the earth and time. this Shakti power. With every breath and with every step. Nourishing you and nourishing the world. Very gently and very easily, I want to invite you to take down your left hand and hold it out to your side. And then your right hand and hold it out to your side. And I want you to imagine that you can clasp very gently the hands of two other women who are making either side of you a circle with the rest of the women here. A big circle of heart connection. Powerful, courageous, divine feminine. And knowing we'll forget, but we'll remember. And that we're never alone. This big circle of light. And in the middle of that circle, the whole world being nourished by this pure heart. We are all together, and we are all what the world has been waiting for. Very gently, just bringing yourself into the awareness of this space and this time, being with amazing women who you would love to be in the same room with. I'm going to play some music now, which is not a meditation music. I'm going to invite you all to either move in your seat or stand and dance and move, however it is. Oops. However it is for you that makes most sense and you want to do, because you get to choose this. Feel your heart. And put your cameras on, so I'm not dancing alone. You can put the volume to whatever you like. Maybe we can have our review. Okay. I tried to start some cameras, but not all of them. But I hope you enjoyed having some fun movement and finishing up with a little bit of chair grooving. Chair grooving. Great to see some of you from the Netherlands. Wow, how wonderful. Wonderful. One of the really important things to move as well, and to do with music's great, because, you know, sometimes energy gets stuck in our body, so it's also good to move it, let it flow. I'm going to hand back to the wonderful, amazing Shaktis of South Africa who have organised us here and inviting me to be with you. Really, I wish I was there, because we could just go deeper and broader and more joyfully. And Raksha, I think I'm handing over to you now, am I?
Yes, thank you. So thank you, Caroline. This is a beautiful rose for you. And you really are such a special rose. And today was so beautiful. We could continue listening to you the entire day. And thank you for emerging that amazing courage within each one of us. Really so wonderful to realize only 11% of women actually understand that they are being courageous. And redefining courage is when I do from my heart, that is an act of courage. And that is what women are doing every day, every moment. And so in our ordinary yet powerful acts, we are being courageous. And just in the storytelling for myself, I was reminded of the key to my courage. And many of us appreciated our courage and how it has really supported us. And every day, I think we should end the day, you know, telling a story to ourselves or find somebody who will listen and tell our story of courage.
Raksha, you know, this is exactly what happened in Chile. The women sat around the table at night and asked their kids, what happened today that you turned something around? Tell me about some courage. And their husband and their daughter. And they told their stories. So yes, it changes.
What a way to end the day, you know, and every day filled with so much courage. And like you said, that pivotal energy, a portal to greater energy, to love and enlightenment and power.
Yeah.
So we can't thank you enough from our heart. And each one, as you can see, the amazing messages coming through on the chat from every powerful being. And thank you for that beautiful meditation as well, you know, just holding that courage as we as women, like somebody on the group said, Womandla. Woman, Womandla.
Womandla.
So power to the women. So in the African language, mandla is power, and wo mandla. So women, really the power that holds